Are we live? You've got an amazing way of letting
We are live. I told you I was a little off today.
Joe looks off. He looks just a tad bit off.
Mark gets the floating head today.
He's been stressed. Joe has been stressed. I got here in plenty of time, like a half hour before my special edition show with Matt Salmon, and Joe was stressed already then.
Would you be stressed if you spent 2 hours cleaning the pool? And I mean, I did the most amazing job ever cleaning our pool.
No, I don't think.
Listen to this. And as I'm walking to my sliding door with the self-satisfaction, Marie's going to get home and see the greatest pool job anyone's ever done, not a speck. This tremendous dust devil comes by, and I watch it, and it came so fast I had to run. And it blew. It made the pool look dirtier than it's ever been ever.
All you have to do is pick it up again and turn it upside down like you did before and fill it back up with water.
It's hard to lift 8 gallons.
Hey, Scott Welker, it's good to see you, Scott Welker. Hey, welcome to the Winsor and Diller Show, all of our listeners that are now able to participate in Joe's stress. Just grab that black chair right over there and bring it on.
Scott, can you sit behind me and give me a massage during the show?
So I tell you, yeah, that would help, Joe. So we have Matt Salmon on the line, ready to go at 4 o'clock. And Joe pushes a button.
You know we're live, right?
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
And Joe,
he's throwing you under.
Right under the
where's
bus.
He going with this?
Under the
Where
back,
is he going
under
with
the
this?
front and back
He's
wheels.
like going backwards and forwards over your head
over.
right now.
He's all like, don't be stressed. Oh, by the way, what Joe did today.
Well, I must compliment you, though, on the equipment upgrades.
Thank you.
No, it's cool.
But however, take out the user manual and learn how to use it.
I should have done that, huh?
We are grateful for the increased technology that every week I show up, it seems like Joe has increased the technology here.
The floating head is getting much better.
That's why I don't have enough money to eat lunch.
I was told I would be the floating head.
All right.
Every Tuesday night.
Hey, Joe, during our commercial at the halfway point,
swap floating heads.
Swap floating heads for Tom. We want to keep.
Do you want to be the floating head today?
Joe, you know I want to be the floating
head.
Not the whole time. No, I'll give him
the reason I did
half.
the floating head is because, look, see the other chair for your guest?
I like it.
That's why.
Our guest, Mr. Jim Eckley, is on his way. He should be here momentarily.
Scott should be complaining. He's not even in the shot.
Why is he not in the shot?
I know. I'm not in the name, so I don't get in the shot.
Well, here's the good thing. After this Thursday, I'm having a new computer built. We should be able to have 60 cameras in here, so we could have like an angle every.
Does that mean even another screen? Because I think we get a new screen every time I come here.
I just ordered 2 more.
I had the privilege, since I'm embarrassing people, I had the privilege of firing Scott this week.
Fantastic.
Sweet.
And
you looking for a job?
Yeah, I know.
No, I rehired him.
Yeah.
I rehired him immediately. No, we had to switch firms. We took him from Phoenix. He lives in Queen Creek. So we took him from the Phoenix office and moved him to the Mesa Queen Creek side, the East Valley side.
Right. Yeah, I've actually been waiting for that firing since I started here. So
that's true.
It's a move that I wanted.
Yeah.
Does it say Walker on the side of the building, or am I jumping the gun here?
You might be jumping. You know, how long did you have to be a co-host with me before I said Winsor and Diller Show?
Like 8 years or
something like that. So Scott can just wait. And so we were at the Phoenician, and we did a great show. That was a good show, a live show at the Phoenician.
You know, we saw a lot of great people. We saw the folks that run Wells Fargo, or at least in the area. We saw Commissioner of the Real Estate, Judy Lowell. We saw the president.
One of my favorite parts was when Tom would go get guests, I would just grab whoever's walking by to come be a live guest, because we're live, right? And so I flagged somebody down and found out it was one of his stiffest competitors.
That was funny.
They're all my competitors.
But this one was.
But they all love him.
I'm their competition.
Oh, in fact, I had several. Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
When you're at the top, everyone's clawing at
you.
That's right.
Did you guys see how cool this is?
That
now
is cool.
On the homepage, we've got the most recent videos going down the left side as well, just in case people miss them.
All right, just in case. So my point on that story, before I get rudely interrupted, is that now Tom is scheduling attorneys as guests.
Payback is a
is
a
a
naughty
killer
thing.
A naughty thing.
So we're excited though to have Jim Eckley on his way, and people don't realize.
Yeah, you did meet him. You sat on a panel together.
I've been on a panel with him a couple times.
Yeah, a couple
actually.
times, and I always tell people when they ask me about who Jim Eckley is, I tell them that I think he's kind of like Denny Crane from Boston Legal. So is that a visualization there?
I've not watched Boston Legal, no.
So, Walker,
I've watched it, but I'm not familiar enough.
He's the Denny Crane character.
Which one's Denny Crane? He's
the William Shatner character.
Oh, okay.
See, I don't know if I should watch legal shows. Like, do you watch title company shows?
I do. I'm big with those.
Every night on YouTube, I do. I just
Hey, by the way, when you start hearing these little noises, it's Scott because he's got a problem touching this and the mic and stuff like that.
You could have just told me during the break, Joe.
Well, I just figured
we were just throwing everybody under the bus.
I just figured I'd throw it out there
today.
today.
The show.
Tonight's theme is criticism night. We're gonna.
Wait, I think you. I mean, your mic. I feel like isn't.
I need a shock cage on there
it's
because
the mic, not him.
Oh, no, of course it's the mic. Yeah. Oh, maybe it is him.
So you know what's interesting? Scott has been doing immigration. The Obama. What do we even call it?
Is it the
Deferred
Dream
Action?
Act?
They actually call it. No, they call it deferred action.
Yeah, everyone's referring to it as the Dream Act, but that's incorrect. It's not.
Technically,
actually
it's not. It's
well,
like
because it's not
something
really an act
prior
of,
to the Dream Act.
Well,
Is that kind of like being on the
exactly.
Dream Team?
It's not actually a law per se, so you can't really call it an act, I guess. But yeah, I mean, the Dream Act is what a lot of people know of it as, but it's deferred action.
So he's now our
officially
Dream Act
what it is.
specialist.
Sweet.
Isn't that cool? So if any of our listeners want to learn how to stay here, even though you're not here legally, call Mr. Dream Act boy.
We like to call him DAS, Dream Act Specialist.
Dream Act specialist.
Right? Yeah, that's the official.
So you got
title.
but you got her down now, right?
Yeah, I do. I feel like I know him pretty well.
So we were gonna have to get a lot of, because it is very sad. And I was gonna ask Matt Salmon, but we ran out of time because that one of the dilemmas is what do you do with somebody who came across as a baby, right? Infant in mama's arms, and mama brings the baby across the border, and then that baby grows up, is here for years and years. All their friends are here, their families are here.
They really don't know anything about their country,
No,
where they
hard
came
to
from.
squat.
Right, they're Americanized as can be.
Yeah, when I tell people that I do immigration law, then you get all ends of the spectrum. People have different opinions of that, but I feel like most people, when you tell them, well, look, there are people out there who were brought here when they were little. They've grown up in this country. Mexico is as foreign to them, or any other country is as foreign to them as it is to us.
What do they think?
And there's no laws to protect them from being deported back.
When you said all sides of the spectrum, the people that are on the far side of the spectrum that kick them all out or whatever, what do they say when you tell them the story about the infant that comes across? Typically, what does somebody say that believes that?
That's like a Bible story.
Honestly,
or are they not for it?
Honestly, the people that I've talked to, most of them say, well, I didn't realize the law didn't help protect those people.
Oh, so they thought they were already a protected class of folks.
Something, yeah. I mean, something in place that would prevent that.
Maybe they
Well,
just
no,
don't
they're
sit
thinking
and
about
think
the
it.
well, they're thinking about the law if you're born here. There's a difference. If you're brought here as an infant, that's totally different, right? That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're 2 years old or 22 years old.
Right.
Right?
Well, up until this
up
act.
until the act.
Up until this unconstitutional move by President Obama.
So the whole thing is now they don't have to worry. Now they're cool. They can hang.
Well,
they may not be cool, but they can hang.
Temporary protection.
Yeah, and when I say unconstitutional, that's an interesting debate, really. But I find that should have been, in my opinion, that is something that should have been done through the legislature and not by a presidential decree. And even if it was going to be a presidential decree, it shouldn't have been only for political gain. So, but the theory behind it, I mean, I've talked before. Anybody who's listened to my show for a while, they've heard me talk before about we can be strong on illegal immigration, which I am. We can want to shut the borders, which when I say shut the borders, not to legal. In fact, I think it should be easier to immigrate, quite frankly. I think our rules are too hard on immigrants. But we should shut the door on illegal immigration. But I've advocated for a long time that we should be able to help those who are brought here as youth, as babies, and keep them here. So Jim Eckley has arrived. It's further than you thought out here, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
It is.
I thought I should bring a passport.
And we're talking about illegal immigration.
Perfect.
And here's one of the
Good
hombres
Yeah.
right now. And what's interesting, and you got to get that dot right in front of you. That orange dot is what you're talking about.
But you got to do it without touching the mic.
There you go. No, that's perfect. How are you?
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Welcome. Well, we've kept all the listeners happy, so they're warmed up for you.
I had no idea that I was the star attraction today.
Oh, absolutely.
They're all hanging up when they heard you weren't here yet, and they're saying, "We'll call back later." So
we will take calls. You got to think. Did you see the deer?
I saw the deer.
That's
I saw
cool.
a ram or two.
Yeah. Ostrich is out there.
No snakes, but I'm waiting. I'm sure that'll
there's
come
a
up.
couple
here
baby
Ostriches
hippos out
killed
there
us.
too.
When
Yeah.
we're done with the show, it should be dark. You'll see the snakes, hopefully, before you step on them.
I think the ostriches kill snakes, right? I think that's
They do.
You're safe out here because although there's a picture, if it's where's that picture?
They're up on top of there.
Up there of Joe killed a snake. It was like 5 feet. How long was that puppy?
One was 9 foot.
9 foot.
And
long.
I do have photos because it sounds ridiculously unbelievable.
9
but
feet.
on the side of the studio.
I've seen them out here. What do they do? Eat prairie dogs or something? But they're a lot bigger than where you're going to find them elsewhere.
I believe it was eating my Patagonian Mara babies and rabbits as well.
I hear a feedback coming. Is that just my earphone, or is everybody
It's
hearing
got to
Feedback.
be Walker. I hear it. It's Walker.
Yeah,
It's got to be
I'm
Scott
probably
Walker.
touching the mic.
It's,
What do you hear? I don't
I
hear
hear the
anything.
feedback too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's feedback.
Just a little hum, you mean?
Little hum.
That's the kegerator.
Okay, the kegerator.
He asked me to fire it up. He's like, I need it 4 degrees cooler.
Trying to keep the guests happy, Joe.
I
You
must say
know?
though, Jim, I'm grateful to have you as a guest. I was kind of teasing Tom right before you got here about I had invited some of the title companies on our show when we were the Phoenician, so he's getting me back by getting attorneys on.
Well, actually, attorneys can come in handy. You know, they're sort of like laboratory animals. You know, there's more of them, and you don't get emotionally attached if you have to do anything. So,
But we've been on a number of panels together, so it's good to be on a show together as well.
well, it is, and I virtually had no idea how far this was going to be today. So I apologize to you and everybody
no
here.
problem.
It took a while. I was clear up on North Val Vista. I took the first 202 rather than the much further south 202.
Oh, that is a haul.
It was. So after the second fill up, you know, gas-wise to make it out here,
Yeah.
I knew we were, and I like the prices. You know, it goes down from, you know, like $3.79 in town. I'm out to $3.22. And I'm thinking here pretty soon there'll probably be somebody pumping kerosene out of the back
That's
of a
exactly
tractor
right.
for
78
about a buck and a
cents.
half.
Not
Right,
far
right.
from here, actually, just
And
right down the
the
road.
good thing is you get a free Otis Spunkmeyer blueberry muffin with a fill-up.
So I was on AM 960 KKNT and looking for a change, and was interviewing different shows and things like that. And the first time I met Joe was at a community or a chamber event. And so I was impressed, and I went on the website. I was impressed with that. I looked at the guests he'd had, you know, Governor Brewer and all this kind of stuff. So I was impressed, and then I decided to drive out.
No longer impressed.
Oh, I had well until I walked in the studio. But man, the drive, I kept thinking it's got to be out here somewhere.
Then he realized the only guests I've ever had were 4 of my neighbors. And unfortunately, they were intoxicated. But Mark got us started, so...
It's thanks to Photoshop.
Yeah,
it
this
looks
is-
like.
I think it's an appropriate place to have your station because we can get away with saying almost anything this far out, right?
You know, it avoids getting sniped when you walk out. For the most part, people don't want to drive this far to,
Does
you
the
know...
political demographics change the further you get out? Are we somewhere
Nah,
between,
not really.
Okay, we're somewhere between hee-haw and I don't know what. At this point.
Correct.
Don't you just like this guy? Hee-haw.
But our listeners, what's good is you'll see. Hopefully, like last week, the phones lit up. We had calls from where they're coming all
You
over.
tell me
all
what
over
to...
the place,
Should I turn
yeah.
the phone lines on
Yeah,
now?
turn the lines on.
Throw
Let's
out
get
the
some
phone number
callers.
too. Let's get that phone number going out there.
But we get calls from all over the United States and
All
sometimes
right.
even Canada
That's great.
outside. In fact, Tom told me that one of the things he wanted you to talk about was short sales, and quite frankly, I don't think short sales have the sizzle anymore. What I think people are interested in is your area of the practice that helps people with alternative financing, because we have investors now looking, and we have a lot of them listening. We have investors that call in. And so some of the questions that, Jim, we want you to talk about is somebody who just went through a harsh, bankruptcy, foreclosure, whatever, from a legal standpoint, so not getting a loan standpoint, from a legal standpoint, what can they do to buy a house?
Well, I wanted to cover that short sale issue just a little bit more before it's dismissed. One of the things that we're noticing recently, and maybe you are too, because you're out in similar climes that we are, the threshold for those who find themselves in a short sale posture is actually increasing. In other words, maybe the folks that are really in the troubled end of things, on the bottom end, have been short sailed out. And you'd think now that, well, their inventory is gone and the people that were maybe caught up in all those issues are probably pretty well played out now, and it's all been dissolved and gone back into the economy somehow. Yet what we're actually finding is only that the trouble is percolating further up. You know, that concept of wealth trickling down, we have insolvency percolating up.
Yes,
and
we
that's
do
where
see
it
that.
seems to be going right now. So now we
In
have...
fact, we've seen our clientele change over the last year and a half.
Now you have physicians in there talking about short sales.
And commercial properties as well as residential.
Absolutely. So really what we're seeing, it would be probably very gratifying to see it slow down and to say maybe that's an issue that's behind and now it's the build-up period. But I'm not sure the meltdown is done yet.
No, I don't know if it is either, but here's what I'm finding as far as when I do seminars or talk shows, I'm finding that the interest level is going down, and the well, I shouldn't say quality. That was almost rude. The higher, because lower income people are quality, but the higher end investors who have multiple properties, I don't know if they're getting their information as much from the radio as they are from calling the Jim Eckleys and Mark Windsors.
I guess that's possible, but certainly you're right that it's not something that starts and ends cocktail party discussion anymore. Short sales are kind of become passé.
Yeah.
But there are other alternatives. I mean, I really thought that the only three real means of money other than conventional money nowadays are probably dealing with foreign interests and foreign money was one. Second is being able to syndicate the money, which has come back again due to low interest rates. You can get a relatively low syndication yield that you can work with and still sell it. In the 80s, when syndication was last famous or infamous, as the case may be, it's all a matter of dates. Then when interest rates were relatively low in the early portion of that, syndication made sense, but when federal treasuries were paying 12% on one-year bonds, there was just no way that you could produce any syndicated product that would sell. So that's number two source of money. And then the third, obviously, is alternative finance, which means owner-carry contracts. And the concept of owner-carry, I think a lot of people still think of owner-carry as something you do at Filiberto's when you make an order at about 10 o'clock at night at the window.
1 o'clock in the morning, that's when you make that order. Yeah.
But, well, that's your time. I'm in sleep by then. But with Tom, it's a different story. He never sleeps. Right. To that extent, an owner carry really just means that the seller is going to act as the financier of the bank.
In different ways.
In different ways. And it can be lease optioning, lease purchasing. It could be an owner carry all-inclusive deed of trust or a land sale contract. There's methods to do virtually everything, and everything has different tax ramifications. But the beauty of most of them is that when appraisal right now is incapable of seeing value, for many different reasons. I think one of them is that appraisers believe that a lot of the big lenders are going to be shut down at some point, and there's going to be some Monday morning quarterbacking on whether or not they appraise properly, and they realize that there's less risk in appraising low than there is in appraising too high. So they don't see the value, yet there are values out there, and it's worthwhile to sellers and buyers at a value level that appraisers just don't see. So it's stumping the marketplace. A ready, willing, and able buyer comes in, wants to pay $400,000 for a property that appraiser finds worth no more than $300,000, which means if they want to get conventional finance, they're going to have to put $100,000 down just to reach that lower price. Plus, if it's a 90% finance, then 10% more towards that price just to qualify as a down payment and get that 90% finance. Most of them don't want to do it, and even those that have the money would find that an inappropriate expenditure of that money as compared to other kinds of investments. So with an owner carry, it can be fashioned specifically like a glove to fit the needs of the parties, what the seller needs and what the buyer needs. And it's not forever. It could be 5
Now,
or 6
Jim, are you
years.
seeing the owner carries in a certain market demographics, higher end? Because you talked earlier about the luxury market. Is that where that...
I'm seeing them in all, but I'd like to see them in the mid to higher level, because when they're on the bottom level, they're usually a way for a seller to get rid of a mistake.
Yeah.
There's no equity in it. There's no skin in the game, as they say, for the seller. And it usually just perfectly wraps an underlying mortgage, or it may just even be less than the underlying mortgage, which is merely a prescription for disaster.
So is there fraud going on in that end of the market?
I think
then?
there's fraud going in.
Yeah, so it's a no-win situation, right? It's kind of like a lease forever.
Now let's get to that in just a second. We've got the callers starting to come in, so our first caller just called.
Jules from Phoenix didn't catch what kind of attorney you were.
Yeah, in fact, let's do that. Let's introduce you properly, Jim.
I'm one that still hasn't been disbarred.
Well,
and there's no such word as a good attorney, since we know that's a contradiction of terms, or a reasonable attorney's fee being charged by any of them, because that also is a contradiction.
It's like jumbo shrimp, reasonable attorney. I don't know where.
Well, with me, I've been in real estate for many years, and primarily what I try to do is I deal in real estate, commercial law, and finance. So that means that we try to figure out ways for people to buy and sell property. We solve things like leases. We solve in litigation. We also handle things like easements and property subdivisions. If it has to do with property or value, we're usually there someplace.
Yes, and it's
very much like your practice.
Sure. And Jim, where's your firm located?
In Phoenix. It's located at 36th and Campbell, and there's several attorneys other than myself.
And and you're the senior attorney there.
I'm the one to blame.
You're the one. The buck stops with you.
Yes, pretty much it.
We gotta hate that at days, right? I mean,
I do. There's periods of time where just driving down to the office, I can feel my stomach tightening.
Yes, exactly. You and I got a lot in common.
It's going to be something between Hiroshima and a Keystone Cops, because it's constantly in the legal business with society still melting as it is. and our economic crisis continuing.
Yeah, in fact,
as you know, it's always a challenge.
It's always you mentioned the appraisal challenge that we have out there with appraisers, and as we see in most areas when the government gets their hand in regulation, because that's one of the problems, right? They started regulating these appraisals and appraisers, and all of a sudden we have a problem with the marketplace. Well, we as attorneys face that. There's days I just wonder, man, are we so overregulated as attorneys at times that we can't really service our clients the way we want to because we're looking over our shoulder?
Well, I
so
do. I feel that way. I actually have more sympathy for the real estate community than I do for the lawyers, though, because they're the ones that are supposedly been given these tools to make us all well in the real estate market. HAMP, HARP, 2MP. I don't know why H's always get in there someplace. But most of these tools turn out to be inadequate for the job, and the poor licensee has to work with them. I'm sure those of our listeners out there realize if they've gone down looking for such things as loan modifications or principal forgiveness so that the debt can be rewritten to something that's affordable for their home, they realize that those are few and far between and usually a matter of great frustration. And that unfortunately, that's the only tools we have to deal with. I would have liked it very much had the original plan under TARP stayed intact, which was that HARP was going to be funded by $600 or $700 billion and become the bad bank, which would be owned by the government and go out and make deals with banks to buy down their mortgages, modify them for the owners, keep the owners in their homes, their kids in school, and them in that neighborhood, and then hold those assets in the bad bank. And by reducing them down, including principal, have put money back in the taxpayer's hands so he could put it back in the economy by spending it.
Now and
it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. You've been analyzing real estate and real estate law longer than I have. I think the dinosaurs were still roaming. I'm not sure, but so you watched. Were you an attorney? You were an attorney during the '80s when we went through the first.
I was there during the middle of the bloodletting that time, yes.
So you've watched that. So when you saw our market in 96, 97, 98, as you were watching it, did you feel that it would have the type of a crash that it's had?
I did in only one respect, and that was I look always at the entry level of home. You know, there was another trend taking place at that time that the crash justly deserved. In other words, I think it might have corrected. You know, they always say when you lose money in the stock market, it's called a market correction, not a loss. It's a correction.
It's a correction if you're looking from the outside in. If you're on the end,
it is, and especially if it's not your money that got corrected.
Exactly.
But in fact, that market really did need correction, and it was overheated primarily by cheap money and lots of it. And when an entry-level home for people that, say, just got out of college and they both had a job and they were just starting out, little money saved, one child, was getting to $350 and $375, which was beyond their capacity to even qualify. So you couldn't even have a home that people could get in as their starter home.
Right.
Without a starter home, there's no second home, no third home, no working your way up. So using almost a sort of a crude analysis, when I saw that those kind of folks could not qualify for those homes and they were still going up another $20,000 almost every other month, I knew that the market was already overheated and in trouble. So I saw it as another bubble, very similar to the immediate prior stock bubble, and figured that everybody that left the stock market was now sticking it in that market, and it was ultimately doomed to die. But that wasn't the real problem in the 80s. That was talking about an inflation factor that had different reasons, and it also had another control that we don't have today. It had the control of high interest rates. When Paul Volcker became chairman of the Federal Reserve, he arbitrarily raised those rates. They deregulated interest rates under the Monetary Liberalization Act, so there was no such thing as usury, and ran interest rates up on everyday consumer finance to 16 and 20% on secured residential property. So obviously that shrunk it down by interest rate terrorism. And so that was a whole different axe that was brought to what was a thought problem, which at that time was an inflationary element brought on because the government was out paying almost anything to borrow back the money it spent in Vietnam. Right. And that's what caused all of that. This was a little bit different story. And the other thing that it had back then that made me feel good is the Glass-Steagall Act was still intact, which, as you know, is that firewall between banking and securities, so that those that are risk takers and bean counters aren't all sitting in the same place.
Right.
And that, of course, was done away with by President Clinton in 1999 under the allegation at that time by the Congress and some of the bigger lobbyists and the whole banking lobby that we were being handicapped from international competition by having Glass-Steagall. I wish the Glass-Steagall Act was back. There are no firewalls right now, and Oxley-Sorbonne didn't do much to it, and Dodd-Frank didn't do much. we're still in a pretty darn precarious position. For instance, would it really surprise you that much if we just walked out of this station this evening and turned on the radio and we heard that all of Europe just crashed?
No, that wouldn't surprise.
And the euro's completely in the dumper, and all the banks are going nuts, and Wall Street closed early, and crisis is now rife virtually every place. And since the United States bought billions of dollars of euros in the last 6 months, that means we're immediately in trouble because we're now connected umbilically to the status of the euro in that way. So we immediately have difficulties. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, neither would I.
So I think people's minds are cocked towards that right now, and that keeps people's money in their pocket, a lot of them. Now, earlier on, Tom was talking about yet another market. I think it's out there, and that one is that middle-class market. I think there's a lot of room for alternative finance there. And in the upper-end marketplace where there are jumbos, now a jumbo is qualified as anything after $729,000, and a super jumbo is anything after $1 million. Jumbo and super jumbo properties are out there. There's about a 6 to 7 year supply right now in the Phoenix metro area. But I can tell you that alternative financing would be fabulous for those folks.
Okay, let's get to those in just a second. We had another call come in.
Bart from Tucson has a question for you. Bart would like to know, he has been renting for 3 years from a building. He's been doing a verbal agreement that his rent is considerably lower because he does improvements to the property. It just got bought out by a new, the whole strip mall was bought out by a new place. He immediately got a letter. They're hiking him up 3 times, and they don't care about the verbal agreement, period. Does he have a leg to stand on, and what kind of money could this cost him to fight this?
Well, first, let's start right off with the retainer that's required. No, just kidding. We want to get to the most important element. You know, they always say you're innocent until proven insolvent. In any event, well, let's start out with the unwritten agreement. Unwritten agreements aren't worth the paper they're not written on.
Especially in real estate.
Especially in real estate, where almost everything needs to be committed to a writing, and a leasehold in excess of 1 year must be committed to a writing according to ARS Chapter 44-101 Sub 6, which says any leasehold in excess of 1 year has to be committed to a writing, and any change of deeds, etc. Those are the kind of things they call it the statute of frauds, and all it really means is it's a way to take our most serious affairs on a daily basis and make absolutely certain they happen by committing them to a writing, and they consider a leasehold in excess of year and interest in property that is that important. Now, secondly, Garner Motors rule out there suggests that even though you may have a written agreement, a no written agreement, you may enforce certain oral representations. It hasn't been extended yet to such things as leases to exceed 1 year, but leases to exceed 1 year that aren't in writing, you could also argue was lease from month to month, or it might have been a lease for less than 1 year if there was an oral agreement. If it was less than 1 year, then it doesn't have to be in writing, and you probably could start talking about an oral recreation of what that leasehold might have been.
If you can prove it.
If you can prove it.
And if you can justify the cost to do it,
and
right?
That's a he said, she said thing that lasts forever. Now, you've got some new folks in there. They're trying to triple it and pitch you out. You obviously have created some improvements there. If there are improvements for which you do not need a license, such as from the ROC, like you didn't do unlicensed mechanical, heating, cooling, and air conditioning work, or plumbing or something like that, then you may have some claim for the amount by which you've enriched them by enhancing the property and reliance on the former owner. And that may be something that even survives a change of ownership. It's something you rendered to the property and therefore be unjust to enrich the next person. That's an argument that someone could raise. I don't know where you'd get.
Now, it's very funny. You lost Joe about 3 sentences ago.
No, I caught up, though. It took me
you
a
caught
second.
up? All right, you
My
caught
brain's
up.
working in a different way today.
And so, Scott, did you notice how he knew exactly which chapter and verse?
Yeah, right.
That's how you get your name on the building.
You need to take,
that's how
you need to take notes, Scott.
Well, I thought I know that law. I didn't know. I couldn't have quoted the chapter.
That's only because we have to every day because everybody's in crisis and calling us. It all sounds terribly clever, except I've probably been on that subject 20 times in the last week. So what would I suggest? You're right about the costs. They're pretty terrible. And that's just, unfortunately, when they say justice in America, they mean justice with cross hairs between the S's, that look like dollar signs. And just us may mean those who have enough money to actually afford their disputes. You might find a lawyer out there that would look at this on a contingency basis. I think about the best thing you can probably negotiate is some gratis on staying there a little bit longer before you actually exit and go elsewhere. I don't know if your improvements were substantial, like you build a house on the property, or you tore a roof off and put a new roof on, you might be able to get a little bit more. But you're right about seeing counsel. That's what you need now.
So, Jim, you're lighting the phones up. That's a good sign for an attorney. That's not a bad deal.
I really thought those were the bounce signals, you know. All those red lights mean, okay, next, get the hook out, drag that guy out.
Well, didn't we blog out there free attorney advice for the next 3 hours or something like that?
We forgot to do all of our little, this is not formal representation. And
that's right, the disclaimer.
Yeah,
that's right.
All that stuff. Don't believe a word we say.
That's how you know tonight. A lawyer is lying. It's when he starts moving his mouth. That's all true, and that's actually a worthwhile disclaimer even to mention, and that is to remember that these things are all fact-intensive, and so what we say in a general summary on 2 sentences of facts could actually be way off track.
You know, in fact, that's a lot of realtors go wrong there because they'll hear from a seminar or a radio program like this, they'll hear something, and they'll take it to every situation they see, not realizing that one little teeny fact can sometimes
changes the entire outcome.
At times.
The phones he's got 2 in a row now.
Yeah, we'll let him start taking some messages. While we're waiting for him to get these, and we try to get people to go live, but oddly enough, most of them just want to leave a message. It's hard to get them to go live.
You can't bill them that way.
Well, that's probably right. You can't get an address for mailing purposes.
That's very funny. So we started talking then about, while we're waiting for these calls, let's take a jumbo type over the 700. What'd you say the dollar amount is?
$729,000. That's where Fannie, Freddie, Jenny, all of those leave off and won't insure them.
Actually, I got one question before we get there. When you were talking about the history, and you were seeing the potential for a fall off because starter homes were so expensive, I have a follow-up question on that. With so many investors purchasing our less than $200,000 homes, aren't we facing the same problem now?
It's likely, actually, the investors I thought would stop buying at about $250 because that's where rents don't pencil out. They mostly want double-digit cap rates. You know, they want to make 10% on their money or better, and they were capable of doing that at the lower rate, the lower purchase price, because, of course, cap rate's a function of purchase price. And I really thought they would shut off at $250, and that would clean the marketplace out, and maybe we'd start getting normal market forces starting on their own again. In fact, though, they've gone beyond that, and the current rates are up to $3.25 and $350, and they're still buying them for investment purposes. I have to believe they've wrung all the appreciation out that's ever going to get. I'm not sure that really was a very wise investment. And certainly by that point in time, with what you can get on fair market rents out of a $350,000 house right now, you've got to be getting caps at 6 and 7. And that's not particularly, it's good in a market where, you know, there's 2 and 3% money out there. But it doesn't really pay for the long haul when you're thinking of maintenance and the overhead for management. And the likelihood that these values could plummet. And the other element, which is, of course, obviously, when you turn everything into rentals, then the competition for rents gets great, and they start coming down. Or it triggers something else now, which Fulton Homes has recently done, and I will send a bill for that plug. Fulton Homes has decided that the level by which people were willing to pay in the 3 and 350s is now enough to provide a brand new home that's full of builder's warranties and about a 3-bedroom. That'll be far more marketable, probably more attractive to the entry-level buyer because Fulton has their own financing, so they can get you in there like a lot of builders do.
Right.
And they'll get you in there as a loss leader at rates that you couldn't afford any other place. So here's what's going to happen. A lot of those people who would have been tenants are going to have a place now to buy a new home and the financing available to do it, built into the overall purchase. So it's likely that those who would have been a tenant, the prices have finally gotten to the point where now it might even be smart to go back and buy a home again. So the market has a way on supply and demand of constantly, it makes one negative, but that negative spawns a positive, and it comes back and changes the paradigm.
But it's still pretty tough for a new home buyer, or not just a new home buyer, anybody who wants to buy a home for less than $200,000. Like, aren't you looking right now?
I'm looking, yeah, and actually something interesting just happened for me last week. So I put in an offer. It's a short sale. Put in an offer for like 99 or something. It's around 100,000. From the time it took for the bank to come in and do the appraisal, which, you know, on a short sale took about 2 months for the appraiser came in, the house had jumped up to 140,000. So that's what the appraisal, or that's at least what the appraisal came back as. So I mean, it is getting to that point where It is, but home buyers,
well, and you know what we'd really like to see to make a healthier market is we'd like to see the locals buying property.
Yes.
As opposed to the external investor who doesn't really have a stake in this community.
Yeah, that was my question. That's exactly what do we do to get that back?
That's
because
right.
It seems like the investors, which I know we get listeners from Canada and all over the place that want, and I don't want to stop the investors, but what do we have to do to get our market back to where the young purchasers can also purchase?
Well, there might even be a crash number 2. In other words, this might be another bubble, and it may be an interim bubble.
Now, you do a lot of study on that stuff. So, what do you think the chances are of that? Because I know you watch.
I think this is a bubble. I think it's an investment frenzy that has generated a bubble. I think the economic sense in buying stopped at about 250. And yet the momentum has gone on. Now, it could be that the smart money stopped at 250 and the dumb money's paying after that, which was the same before. Dumb money runs prices up. You know, the money that'll just, if I can get it, I'll spend it, and I don't care what the price is because I just have a belief in that it'll inevitably go up. It's completely unrealistic, and what they used to call it exuberance, over-exuberance, etc., that is without basis. That could very well be what's happening on a mini scale, not the maxi scale we saw of yesteryear. And that could be that the investors have paid too darn much, and they are running out of quality tenants, and they are having to ask rents that nobody's going to match, and that makes more sense for them to go buy.
So that bubble occurs when apartments drop their rents and people start moving out, getting bigger apartments, and then condo conversions and all that happens again.
Condo conversions, and then finally you have outfits that come out and start building brand new houses that, because of their financing capability, they can produce both the financing and the house at a rate that tenant finds very amenable.
Right.
And now he's out of it. And then you get a mini collapse of that micro bubble that was built on those investment properties.
Certainly that would be good. When I say good, and I take that tongue in cheek, because that investment market was between 150, say 50,000 to 150,000. So first time home buyer market. That's what's going to explode. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's actually, at this point, it's a little higher than that. I think the tumble is for those that paid 3 and 3.5. Those
so they stretched.
I think that's really stretched at that point, and I can see those tumbling.
Right.
Okay, we got another caller that came in. I love this. We're getting so many calls.
We do. We have Perry from Tempe. Here's an interesting one for you. I left my building due to bad management, and I took the toilet. Because when he moved in, and no pun intended, he said there was a really crappy toilet in there. He also said there was one of those round thermostats, just a really low-end $9 ones, and he put a really nice Honeywell one in. So he also took the thermostat, and now he's been served that he is getting sued for taking these things.
For waste.
Does he have a leg to stand on?
A leg to stand on.
That depends upon whether the toilet is reinstalled. No, let me back up for a minute. I didn't hear whether it was a residential or commercial.
It was a commercial strip mall property.
Okay. Well, there is no real duty to make a commercial property habitable, and it's as an ongoing duty unless it's spelled out in the lease, whereas there would be in a residential because the Arizona Landlord-Tenant Act so specifies. Essential services have to work, such as heating, cooling, plumbing, air conditioning. It has to be free of pests and debris. So when you're in commercial, the rules all change. Now, likely that this absconding with products that were on premises and tearing them out of the wall or out of the floor, that's going to be, as one of the commentators here said, a waste, certainly a breach of contract if you were there under contract. And, of course, it's in an impermissive removal. In most cases, I'm going to assume there's a written lease. The lease says any changes or modifications have to be with the advanced written approval of the landlord, and picking things up and removing them actually is statutory waste if it's not waste under the contract. So I'm not sure what you would have used as your reasons, except that you were constructively evicted. In other words, the management was so terrible at the site that...
but in the commercial lease, he probably loses.
I think in commercial you do lose. They would probably suggest, well, why didn't you go through some of your other rights rather than suddenly abandoning the property and ripping out things on your way out.
Now, review form 2, let's assume, I'm going to change the facts. Let's assume that it was a residence and a first mortgage, purchase money mortgage, protected from anti-deficiency, but they took the toilets and thermostats and things like that.
Still have an action for waste that's statutory under ARS Chapter 33.
And the result? They at one time they were protected from the anti-deficiency, and by taking the toilet?
It doesn't necessarily mean you're not covered by anti-deficiency. It may remain the same because the action for waste is an independent action for damages.
Yes, but the cases that I've read, now I can't quote them like this guy, but courts have been able to allow the lender to go for the deficiency when there's waste as an exception. Oh, I can think it's under 33-814, I believe, A or B. Waste is an exception to protection for the anti-deficiency statutes.
Well, technically, if you're talking an affirmative waste, if you're talking a transactional waste or a waste by attrition in the marketplace, that's what the fair sale through a trustee sale or a sheriff's sale is supposed to take care of. And, of course, that's still non-deficient. The lender takes the risk of fluctuations in the marketplace. But right now, I don't know of any particular case that says that if I dismantle the toilet and the loan is $100,000 underwater, and ultimately there's a foreclosure, that now I'm liable for $100,000.
I believe there. Oh, not 100. Yes, I believe you are. I believe there's a case, so I will find it and ship it off to you. Scott, new assignment.
Yeah, no. I
you got to put in a toilet.
You see, no, I think that is correct.
I thought that was actually under the statute.
I believe it is, so I will get it to you.
I think we've had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4,700 foreclosures we've been involved in at one time or another. The only time we've heard of these kind of waste allegations, of course, really significant waste, is such things, and very intentional, like pouring concrete down the toilet.
Yes.
Right.
That happened in our neighborhood. Somebody took out everything, including doors, cabinets. This is just right around the corner from me. They went into the ceiling and then cut out units that are up there underneath the air conditioner, whatever those things are. They stripped that thing down.
Well, I know of no such case, and the reason I would even think from a practical standpoint, first of all, it would be a real earth shaker because it would be pretty much unique in the United States that one of the anti-deficiency or partial anti-deficiency states had made such a rule. But secondly, just imagine what the argument would be. Tell me what lender wouldn't be able to go in and find holes punched in the wall from picture hanging, or some room where the dog slept in, or kick marks all over, and say the property's now been wasted, and now I get the opportunity to go for a deficiency, which the legislature has been just almost crazy about holding on to. And certainly, as you know, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court have had numerous opportunities to shorten the anti-deficiency protection when, in fact, lately they've been expanding it.
I still think that is an exception, but we will wait for our next panel discussion. I'll be armed.
Yep, we actually had another
All
caller.
right. Yeah, we've got Linda from Westlake Village, California, and she has a similar situation, although it's different. Her insurance office installed had an $18,000 saltwater aquarium put in the wall. They have been there several years now. They're leaving. The landlord has come in and made it very clear, do not take the aquarium out. It is now built in. And she says, we paid $18,000 for it. Those are our fish. And, what's up? Can she cover the hole? Can she remove it and have the wall covered, cover the 10-foot hole in the wall?
And under California law, they actually can hang onto that aquarium under what they call the doctrine of accession. It's usually written up in the lease that way. There's a common law doctrine of the same thing, and that means that whatever it is that you've attached has become so indoctrinated into the structure that it would cause damage by its removal. Now, probably her better argument, especially, and I'm sure if it's like most commercial leases, it's got a clause that says, you won't make any improvements without our permission. However, any improvements you do put in become accessions or become connected with the real property and part of it, and it is at the landlord's option as to whether he directs you to remove it and repair the damage at the conclusion of the lease or whether it remains part of the leasehold. There's probably a clause like that. So if you have an accession clause, those are generally enforceable in California. I think the better argument is that it didn't accede. In other words, I don't know how much work you did on that wall, but the question usually is, well, how much damage is it? For instance, if you moved the aquarium away, it certainly wasn't sealed against the wall. It actually had a panel that completely enclosed it. And you push it up against a wall and you puttied some in and you painted, that's probably not an accession. And if it's a wall that was part of your TIs, your tenant improvements, you probably own the TI, or at least arguably you could manipulate the TI if you want to, could have the whole time you were there, so you probably always retain constructive possession and control over the aquarium. I think the better argument, though, is to just argue that it isn't an accession and use all those rules. It's not part of it. It didn't cause any kind of a damage other than just a big spot of paint that needed to be repainted on removing it, etc., etc. Problem is, if you've already absented yourself from the property, The landlord now is, of course, in possession of it. It's tougher than heck to fight that out. I don't know why he wants all those fish in the first place.
Yeah, that's the funny part. She said he even warned her, don't take those fish.
He might be a fish lover. You never know.
And I'm not so sure that got him the fish in the water and all the other implements in the tank. And, if you remove those from the tank, I'm not sure what you have left. And there's attachments to the tank that even if the tank itself was attached, he wouldn't end up with, which makes the tank functionally useless if you took them with you. So you might even start arguing you're emotionally attached to the fish and you'll just die if you don't get them back.
He's amazing, isn't he?
He's amazing. He's amazing. Here, live on the Winsor and Diller Show. Hey, we appreciate those calls. We invite others to call in 480-745-1033. And we're not going to take, we're just have to do more commercials at the end.
We're good with no commercials.
We didn't take a commercial break, and we've only got 10 minutes left, so I'm not going to take a commercial break.
I wanted to toss one more thing on that. She might be insured for that tank, and it might be something that you can contact your insurance agent and say if this guy absconds with your tank, you deem yourself damaged. It may very well be covered, especially if you had an itemized list of some of the bigger items you brought in there. It'd be a covered item, and they'd pay you for it. And they'd go after the landlord.
And it's an insurance office.
Very sly.
Look at that. And it's an insurance office.
That is very, very sly.
I'm sure you'll be able to find a policy that says that someplace in your portfolio in the insurance office.
Sweet.
All right, now we're finally back to these jumbo loans, larger houses. That was fun, though. Fun little conversation. And let's talk a little bit about the options that someone would have in purchasing. We're going to look through purchaser's eyes to begin with. So somebody wants to buy a home, nicer home, and they don't want conventional financing. They want to go out and get some options from the owner carryback.
Most likely, the buyer, especially on the larger home, is going to be able to put a smaller down payment. Many times it's not going to be subject to an appraisal. The buyer will form his own opinion or ask his broker to come up with what he thinks a value today and tomorrow might be. Most of these are very depressed today, so today's value isn't really very indicative of what a tomorrow value is likely to be if the economy resumes once again. There's capacities for tremendous jumps up in those kind of marketplaces. I actually drink my own Kool-Aid. I bought a home in one of the three canyons in Paradise Valley at a time when the market was down, did my own lease option on it, and came out like a bandit on it because originally I think I paid like $400,000, and today, even in this economy, it's appraised at $1.2 million, and it went up as high as $1.7 million. And essentially because when those jumbo markets are highly depressed and people are panic-stricken, you can get prices that are remarkable, especially when there's no more land left to be had there.
Are those prices still out there?
Those that same neighborhood I'm in now I'm afraid to go back and check the comps, but I've had two in a cul-de-sac containing 6 homes that have just, I guess, done a midnight move out. One of them is a physician. Another one, it seems to me, he owned a couple of car lots, and these were relatively well-to-do folks, at least at one time, suggesting again that crisis percolates to the top, it seems like these days. And so it may not be the same, but it does look like these are good neighborhoods with resilient homes. They're pretty, and their acreage in that area, you have to buy a minimum of 1 acre, and it doesn't look like they're making any more, and most of it is sold. So it's finite, very finite, and not fungible. It's an area that's very contained, so a lot of people want to live there. So I think it's a relatively stable and vital market, and it tends to take dramatic drops and then dramatic rises right behind it. But going back again to what might encourage a person to go into a neighborhood like that, for one thing, I think the future values are tremendous, and I think they're very motivated, and I think those values are obviously there. The down payment can be small. Appraisal is not a contingency, so you can get into it because you have belief in its future, and now you can actually afford to live like that if you want to. Down payments typically are 5 to 10%. They're usually based upon what you fashion yourself, because it's a rubber ball. Seller and buyer fashion something they can live with. If you're actually going to take title, like an all-inclusive deed of trust, then you'll get all the tax advantages of ownership, including tax deductions and interest deductions on the payment that you make, just like to anyone else, like a bank, to your owner. So it actually, it's a very viable way of moving in there. You're getting the advantage of using somebody else's credit. You're not qualifying on a usual credit standard, although a good seller and his broker will typically try to qualify you, ask for a financial statement, and tri-merge proof that you're credit worthy. And if you provide it, and you are, and you may have one little glitch, Maybe you gave back a second home that had a non-deficiency instrument, so you're not going to be pursued by anybody.
Right.
In fact, your net worth is probably higher now.
Right.
And a lot of folks have really got two incomes and have done rather well. They haven't succumbed to this. This is their moment to move up and to do rather well at it. And rather than make 5 and 10 and 11% to double their money, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Sellers of those properties are very motivated right now. The typical way that you talk to the seller is, look, it's going to be right down the street from the other house you own, which many times is amazingly enough. You'll retain title to the property until they're completely satisfied. You'll pre-qualify the buyer. You'll probably get Dr. Cigarkoff, a made-up name, by the way, from the Mayo or something that's going to come down. He likes to live large. He and his wife are used to it. They've been told by their financial advisor there's a bad time to go write a check, but it's not a bad time to get in there for a low down payment and use your credit for a while and wait and see what happens on the marketplace. Typically, they don't want to use your credit longer than 5 to 7 years, so there's always a balloon at the end of that. And from a seller's standpoint, you take debt equity and you start making money. You take a water bill that up in there now, no kidding, for those that have a very green property, is about $900 a month water bill. You take $300 and $400 landscaper's bill, it's gone. Now the other guy's paying it.
Right.
Big taxes, 5, 6, 7,
Right.
800, grand a year.
Electricity.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Electric is out of sight because you got these high ceilings, so both air conditioners are groaning. They're turning purple with heat out there. Dispatching water out the condensate line that looks like a fire hose.
Yep, can be a great deal.
It's about $1,200 to $1,400 a month. So what they get off their back is they don't just get 6 and 7% of money they wouldn't have had on a dead asset, which means they're getting some financing. But they also get off the hook from $2,000 to $3,000 technically if you prorate it out on a monthly basis.
All those costs.
Of just holding costs.
Right. Got another caller.
Max and Ross from Paradise Valley. Been in the home buying market, finally bought a home in Paradise Valley. Closed upon move-in. They were walking around, went to the backyard, and the pool was gone.
The pool was gone.
The pool was gone. They said, she said that, that's what I thought. She said that the seller overheard a conversation between her and her husband where she said she hated the pool and he was afraid it was going to fall through. So the guy had dirt brought in, completely covered in the pool, filled it in, and had gravel put over the top of the pool. So she's got this rock waterfall sticking out of the ground and no pool. Does she have any kind of recourse here?
Well, first of all, she wins the Caller of the Day award.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm like, I said to her, did somebody steal the pool?
Award it.
Someone stole your pool, huh? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Well, you get what you bargained to buy, and if that pool was there when it was shown, whether or not they made a representation that the pool was going to go with the property, the logical implication would be that it was. It certainly is part and parcel of the property. It's an implement in a session.
It's got to be on the appraisal.
Right?
Typically,
there's going to be a photograph, probably taken by the listing agent.
It's on. She said it's on everything, and all she meant was she didn't like the design, but of course she wanted the pool. That's why they bought the house.
This fella just virtually lost it. That man's been out in the sun too long on the selling end. So she's got a very good claim. That's time to go find a lawyer.
Good news is she gets a brand new pool.
Can you give
Jim gets a better pool.
Can you give your contact information?
Jim Eckley.
Yeah, and the pool might even be salvageable. I had a case like that once before where
Did you really?
prior to sell, the seller actually thought that it might be wise to fill in the pool. The problem is if it's plaster-lined pool, that plaster-lined pools don't fare well when you empty water during the summer months. They'll actually microcheck and usually collapse. And if they filled it up quickly, it's possible that it didn't get direct sunlight. It may very well be restorable. So there's a possibility there.
Amazing.
How do they get a hold of you, Jim?
Area code 602-952-1177, and we're on it.
And do you have a website as well?
I do. It's eckleylaw.com. www.eckley, E-C-K-L-E-Y, law, all one word, .com.
All right, if you have any issues, if your pool's been filled in, if your pool's been moved,
disappears overnight.
if somebody's floating in your
toilet's
pool,
gone.
That's amazing.
call Jim Eckley.
This is the water slide to nowhere right now. or a very, very rough scoot on the bottom across the gravel.
It hurts when the kids slide down that.
Interesting.
All right, this has been a wonderful show. Hey, Tom, do we have any events coming up our listeners need to know about?
You know what? We have a huge open house coming up on September 20th at Arizona Academy of Real Estate. We're all going to be a part of.
Right by our office.
Right by Winsor Law in Mesa. We'll have more information on that. In fact, we're going to have the owner, Deb Prevost, who's owned schools in the Valley for many, many years. Very well respected. Does a lot of training for realtors. It's going to be an open house on a brand new campus in Mesa. So more information to follow on that, but we're going to have live music. In fact, we had Jordy here, whose mom is Melanie Safka. She's going to be our entertainment that night. And
that'll be cool.
You're invited. Everybody's invited. The Chamber of Commerce will be out there doing a ribbon cutting. So that's our next major event coming up. So.
Hey, and on that note, the 25th of October, I just got my confirmation. We've got the Gin Blossoms coming in.
Sweet!
Good.
I will be here.
Nice.
All right.
And the 26th of October, you know what's happening that day?
It's 2 days after my birthday. Still celebrating.
Is my birthday.
Oh, it is.
Are we seriously born within a few days of each other?
We are.
Wow.
Except
But
I was
a decade in between.
Yeah, a decade in between. But other than that,
Yeah,
we're
whose
almost-
decade, though? Which one?
That's
Excuse
right.
me.
Stop.
I just had to say that just to get to you.
I'm going to go fill your pool.
Hey, and Mark, I want to thank you very much. You gave me some great plugs today, but I don't want any of the listeners to forget the fact that you're a pretty darn good attorney. And
Well, yes,
your
but-
number is the alternate number out there.
I must
What
admit,
about the
though-
darn good title guy?
But this is a true
What
statement.
about the darn... No, I
Yeah, and I wish we
All
would
right,
have
the
invited
good
that guy. That's all I can say.
He's at home sleeping already, right?
But I want my
listeners.
listeners, my listeners really should know this, that if you're considering litigation, though, Jim, you've got substantial more experience in real estate type litigation than I do. So I have no problem in having my listeners call.
Don't
call
you just
you
love
on those
this
types of
guy?
things.
He's just such a nice guy.
But it is true. It is true. However, if you want to go for the Dream Act, Scott's your man.
That's right. That's right.
Welker.com.
And for that, I will leave you the
Let's-
usual six-pack to go. Thank
we
you,
should
Mark.
we should do a show, and we're out of time, but we should do a show, a special edition on the Dream Act, right? We'd have to speak Spanish every other sentence or something, but that'd be fun.
You know what? You want me to help you set that up? I'll
we
set
could
that
start
up.
it by-
That'd be fun.
We will do
'Cause
that.
that kind of
We will
stuff.
do
We
that.
could start it by counting sheep.
No,
do you
that
think?
would be. Dream
No,
Act.
it'll be-
All right,
there
all
we
right.
go.
That's funny.
Ah, no,
That's
I'm not.
funny.
It's the end of the
Brought
day.
to
My
you by
jokes
Spirit.
I
aren't
don't
as
think
good.
the Dream Act has had enough coverage. I think that's a worthwhile venture.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
That would be a good.
Yeah, we should
It would
do
be
it.
a good show. I think we could see how many calls we got. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is the Winsor and Diller Show with special guest Jim Eckley. You've been wonderful. Thank you for driving out to the wilderness to find us. And each week, Scott Welker, and we appreciate you. Join us again next week.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
God bless.
Night.
Are you experiencing computer problems? Is your computer running slow? Bogged down with viruses and spyware? You need a reliable and knowledgeable, trustworthy computer service company. Contact Computers, Networks, and More, located in Santan Valley. Get your computer or laptop